So a central part of the project Barrangal Dyara will be celebrating languages. We'll be celebrating the Southeast languages and the revival projects that are occurring right across our country. Languages as such remind us that nothing's been lost, and that we may have lost many of our cultural objects in the fire, but we've not forgotten them. We've continued to speak them, we've continued to talk about them, and they're still locked within our language. Our next speaker, Dr. Clint Bracknell, continues this connection between song and language. As a Noongar man, his research centres around songs, the sounds and songs of the southwest of Western Australia. Clint is working as a researcher down at the Conservatorium of Music as part of the Sydney University. And like this project, I think has engaged in multiple knowledge systems, bringing together, breathing new life into memories. Clint has been recognised for his work, working at a number of levels, and has won the State Library of Western Australia's Batty Memorial Fellowship, and has been working with the United Nations on Indigenous languages. And I'm really pleased to have him here today to be our first keynote speaker. Thanks.
My country, to quote our great West Australian composer Jimmy Chai, is a long way away. And I'm a bit of a blow-in here. I've been living in Redfern for the last year and a half, starting a contemporary music program at the Sydney Conservatorium. So that's a bit of a cultural change in itself. And then so I make a lot of music, any sort of music, but where my heart's at is working back home with language, with song, with my family. And I'm a little bit concerned that the stuff I'm going to talk about is not directly relevant to what we're talking about today, but I'm hoping that Jonathan and I will have a bit of a yarn afterwards and start to synergise things. And thanks for the invite, and thank you, sir, for the welcome, as you've always been welcoming. So yeah, let's get started, I guess. So right from that first slide there, you can see that the country I'm talking about is a fair bit different to the thriving metropolis of Sydney. We've got a few big national parks and stuff, which I'm lucky enough to go through. And, it's mainly sort of farming area where I'm talking about. You've got Albany, which is a relatively big sort of city, calls itself a city. But apart from that, it's not terribly well populated like it is here. But that said, there are a number of connections between this place and where I'm from on the other side of the continent. Uncle Graham Merritt, who's another transplanted Noongar, took me out to Lapa when I first moved over here, and I saw lots of the same plants that I'd see back home. And so there's a few little connections hopefully we can tease out. So that's some of my crew. We're in Albany there. I was born in Albany, which is the southernmost tip of Western Australia. Mum's family's always been from about 200 kilometres east of that across to Esperance and the Bight, that sort of country. And we've been getting together for a number of years just to work on language, culture, song, that whole cultural sustainability stuff. For a number of reasons, mostly just because it feels good. It feels like something that's good to do, makes us all happy. And there's other reasons too, but that's what's at the heart of it. You would have seen the old multicoloured Horton map probably countless times. It's an interesting sort of device to just show diversity in terms of its accuracy, and what some of my crew say, jury's out, but it's a good way of hooking people into understanding the linguistic and cultural diversity of Australia. So that country where I'm from is part of this grey area, which is home to one Aboriginal language, which is a Noongar language. And it's got dialectic variation, but that said, grew up in Albany, and I can talk to Noongars that live in Perth, and we're talking the same language. We understand each other. Might say things a little bit differently, but it's the same language. So because it's such a large geographical area, and because we've got about 30,000 people that identify themselves as being Noongars, it means that that's a kind of an important language. I may be biased because it's, my mum's language, but it gives us a lot of momentum, and language revival's been going on in our part of the world since at least the 1980s in a pretty strong way. That said, it's still a struggle. Like the last census count, I think counted less than 400 speakers of the language. So less than 400 speakers of a language that's the heritage language of over 30,000 people. That still seems like it's quite an endangered language, and there's a lot of work to be done. Okay, so that's the big Noongar thing. So that's everyone talking the same language. My little sort of family, my cultural elders call our mob Willaman. And linking into what Jonathan's saying about birds, that's something that's true in our part of the world too. What was your word for crow? Wagon. We got Warradong. So we're just hearing him a little bit differently at the end. So Willaman, willow is the curlew, the bushstone curlew, this one here. You can still see them if you go, they're in Brisbane. You can go through the city of Brisbane and they just fly around at you. In our part of the world, they're endangered now. And I haven't seen any in Sydney yet, although a Noongar staying with me recently said he thought he heard one outside the entertainment quarter the other day. And I was like, you sure? You sure? I'll have to go check it out. But so our crew, my sort of senior people would say that we're a Willaman. So we're a group of people that are like a curlew, like the bushstone curlew. So he's a shy bird. He's sort of tall and skinny and very retiring, but he's got a very distinctive song, which sounds like that willow, 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 So in some parts of Australia, it's not appropriate to show pictures of people who have passed away, but all of these people here have requested that whenever I talk about this project, because I'm not the one that started it, I'm just a junior member who came along and knew how to put a website together, and it sort of snowballed from there. I've got to make sure that they're acknowledged when I talk about this project. So these people, Nanny Ing Hall, who's still with us, Pop Lomas Roberts, Uncle Gerald Williams still with us, Nana Hazel Brown still with us at 90 years of age, and Nan Audrey Brown, and she's passed away. So 2 have passed away, 3 still with us. They're people from our Willaman mob who have language, grew up with language, and are able to give us this real sort of almost like an authority over what we're doing. Yeah, and they're the ones that said, right, we need to do something now. And just as they were coming to that conclusion, these notes turned up that some American master's student had come over and he talked to some Noongars in the 1930s. He went back, because it's the Depression, he went back to sell shoes or something in America, didn't become a linguist, so his notes stayed in his attic for years, and they were repatriated through IATSIS and through the University of Western Australia to some of those people whose photos I just showed you. And through combining what they know and they remember and the words of their elders written here in the International Phonetic Alphabet, we've been able to sort of snowball into these workshops where it's more about an emotional reconnection with story as much as it is a reconnection with language, and then it's also a reconnection with landscape. So this has been going on since about 2006, 2007. I jumped on board in about 2010. I was a high school music teacher, and after making all sorts of music, I was thinking, well, I like listening to music in different languages. Why can't I sing in my own language? So that led me to get more involved with what was going on with what my mob was doing. And because I'm, got skills in terms of audio recording, putting websites together, that sort of thing, learned a lot about linguistics in the meantime. I've tried to make myself useful. So when you're reconnecting with stories, one of the first things that we found as a group was that a lot of us are really talented painters. I'm not. But a lot of us are. So that was one really good way to reconnect, was you're listening to the language, you're listening to the stories that maybe haven't been heard in a few generations, and we're reconnecting with that in a physical way through painting the landscape. And this process, because we're starting off with a very small group, just our Willaman mob, we've been conscious to not just consolidate in our little group and then consolidate in country by going out on field trips and stuff to reconnect these stories with landscape, but then share with the broader Noongar community, because it's all Noongar's language, just because this stuff started off with a small group. And then you go and share in schools, so all the Wodjila kids can hear all the Noongar stuff as well, because they live in the same country. and then publish for the rest of the world. So through doing this since about 2006, 2007, it's a long process. We've put out about 4 illustrated bilingual picture books, and there's another 2 coming out soon. So it's been relatively successful in that we feel good doing it, and the stuff we're producing we're proud of. But that said, there's our website if you want to go check it out. That said, talking to Arnie Iris, she's right in the middle there with the orange shirt on. She's been teaching in Tambalup Primary School, teaching Noongar language for quite a while, and she says, yeah, the young kids pick it up really good, but then once they're not getting it in primary school, it's this sort of drift. And she's wondering, what can we do to help the uptake of language and make sure it continues? And one of the most successful things she's done in schools is through singing, and that's something that happens right around Australia when you're teaching Aboriginal languages, especially as revitalisation languages. Singing is really effective. It's easier to learn how to do a song in a language that may be a foreign language or a revitalisation language. It's easier to just learn a song than it is to learn the whole language fluently. Okay, and you can, by doing that, by singing a song, you're embodying the words of your ancestors. You're also doing something that's performative, something that's very social, and it's got all these sort of well-being results as well, which is really powerful. So the sort of thing that we'd be doing with these when we go into schools with these this Woolaman mob is we'll do little silly songs like this one I wrote about with my Uncle Kim started this one off and I sort of finished it. So this idea of cart, court, quan, jin, 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 jin. So the cart, court, you quan, you bum. So that's fun, you know, that's a fun little song. But the way that this song ended up being is because I was starting to look at, on the advice of those senior people that are working with this project, they said, hey, well, can you go and see if there's any audio recordings of songs? Can you go and see if there's any old lyrics somewhere? So I've been over to IATSIS, been looking through the State Library of Western Australia, been looking in every nook and cranny I can find for old songs. And so this song ends up being inspired by old Noongar melodies as well. So that sort of makes it interesting. And Jodie Edwards down in Wollongong is, I think, doing something fairly similar with language down there. But the beautiful thing is I managed to find about 99 examples of song, whether they're audio or just written lyrics in our Noongar language. And there's other ones too that I haven't got access to that I know about. But the most beautiful thing that happened when I was doing this is Pop Albert Knapp at a workshop just came out of the woodwork and said, oh, I know a couple of songs. So there's this memory and this ability to perform in Noongar country that just because there's not a forum for doing it, that people haven't been doing it for a while. And the tradition of singing old songs in Noongar and making up new songs inspired by those old melodies in that same song tradition or that same song genre is not over. That tradition has kept going. And in fact, if you look at the definition of the word tradition, a tradition is something that is transmitted, that is passed on. Okay, so no matter where we are now, if we start doing things, the tradition continues. So the tradition is not something that's old and archived and locked away. The tradition is within us to unlock and perpetuate. And that's hopefully an empowering way of looking at things. So Pop Albert, he heard his granddad singing these songs and he gave them to everyone at the workshop. And he was worried because he didn't want to take him to his grave. He's a beautiful man. And we're all crying, and a lot of these workshops that we've been doing, it's all really emotional sort of stuff and really powerful sort of stuff, and that's sort of what song unlocks, I think. Now, part of the archival research that I sort of hinted at that came out of my discussions with senior people that we've been doing this language stuff with, some of the stuff I have to work with, or that I've found, and all of this stuff, most of it's public domain, it's just sitting there in the Batty Archive State Library. So this is some notes that are from Daisy Bates's notebook. Daisy Bates was a very interesting, controversial character, to say the least. Yeah, won't get into that. But at least one of the good things Daisy Bates did is she was talking to Noongars at a time when many other people were. and she wrote down what they said. And those Noongar she was talking to spoke English and they spoke Noongar. Daisy Bates probably knew a little bit of Noongar, but from my looking at her notebooks, she wasn't that conversant in it, and it was the Noongar people she was talking to, they were bilingual. Quite often in her notebooks, you'll get her writing down in her pretty awful and ever-changing orthography what they're saying in Noongar, and then she'll write down the explanations that the Noongar people give to her. So it's almost like you're listening to an audio recording, almost. It's refractive prism, but it's getting there. But some of the stuff, there's just no translation. So we have here a song by Ngalbaich, who's a woman from Jeramangup, which is sort of within our ancestral country. And she's saying it's a Kaili song with boomerangs, a song to be performed with boomerangs. Okay, that's some good information. And then we have all these words that you need to understand her handwriting and her orthography to get around. So we, stare into screens and think creatively. That's me with Winmar. She's one of the longest serving Noongar language teachers in our part of the world. She is gold, absolute gold. So we end up with this sort of thing, like a word list based on the words we can identify in that text. So we've got a whale, we've got this sort of ba, could be a number of things. We've got your court, your heart or your spouse, your sweetheart. We've got a birt, a path, a track, a sinew, a vein, a Noongar, a person, a human, a man. You got something hanging there? You got what? This, you. And da, I think I've heard Dalang spoken around here as like language. I don't know if that's true, but there's all these interconnections with the language that's really interesting too. And then you put that together and you sort of see this text starting to emerge, which as a text in Noongar, I mean, mamang ba kort ni, mamang ba kort bidi waran, nunang da kort bidi waran. So when you try and just substitute those words in, something starts to emerge. And then luckily, when I looked at this song, so you've got something hanging there, some sort of trail, whale. There's this story that we just put together in a book in 2010 about a young man jumping inside a whale, singing a song taught to him by his grandfather, willing the whale to carry him along a well-worn path, an ocean songline. People don't really talk about that much. It's all this idea of Aboriginal stuff's just on the land. Nah, not at all. Okay, so we've got an ocean songline here. And so when you think about, and this is all our mob that's done all the pictures, when you think about that sort of story, I'll get to him in a moment, that sort of story, and then you find a little bit of archival evidence like that song, things all start to come together. And we know the lessons of that particular journey that ancestor took. We've got an idea of, that lyric looks like it fits that story too. And we're starting, and we've already got pictures that we've done. So we're starting to put together this sort of multimodal way of understanding landscape, connecting with each other and telling other people about where we're from, which is pretty potent, I think. And we need everyone to come to the table to do this. I'm no good at painting a picture. I'll sing you a nice song, but can't paint a picture to save my life. So we need everyone coming in, and it's a way to bring everyone in and get everyone involved. And this sort of stuff has a strange sort of power, we've found. My uncle Jason Minader was doing a course at Curtin University back in 2001, and he did like an Aboriginal oral history with Pop Lomas, who was one of those gentlemen whose photo I showed you. And he was doing, the Aboriginal oral history, where'd you work, where'd you grow up, that sort of thing. And then Pop Lomas, on that tape, on about, I think, 3 or 4 tapes, he sung 2 songs. And one of the songs was talking about the turkey, the Australian bustard, this bird here, and his skinny legs. And everyone's talking about his skinny legs, this sort of thing. You know, and it went on, and there was more of the song, you know, but I won't share that here. But the point being that it's about this bird. It's a song clearly about this bird. Well, this bird is endangered. You don't see him around anymore, okay? Now, I got that tape, digitised it for Unc, gave it to him, cut out the song as an MP3, played it at a workshop before asking his elder sister, Nan Hazel, and his daughter, Auntie Gay, to play it. They said, yes, all right. Auntie Gay said she'd never heard her dad sing before, and he's a beautiful singer. So it makes you think about all that stuff people are holding that you just don't know about. And so I'm just about to play the song, and then I put this picture up so everyone knows what bird we're singing about. And then Nan Hazel just on, because she's pretty deaf. She just went into this big thing about what this bird is, you know, where you see him, who's allowed to hunt him, who's allowed to eat him, all this sort of stuff. All this really amazing information just came out of her like a waterfall. And then we start to sing just that little bit of the song that I shared with you at the start. Okay, and we sing that over and over and over again. And then we all feel pretty good. Oh yeah, we're singing an old song, hasn't been sung in more than a decade. Wow, good on us. And we all go home. And then about a month later, one of my uncles, because I was living in Perth at that time, says, talking to some farmers, they've seen all these birds coming back. Don't know. So with this stuff, like it's got something that's more than just aesthetic appreciation, more than just history, more than just making people feel good. There's something really deep we're tapping into here that's got stuff that happens outside of what we might consider rational, scientific, academic. I hate it when people call me an academic. And in terms of putting all this stuff back together the way we've been trying to do it now, a very little small way, because we're just a speck, we're just a drop in the ocean in terms of what we're doing, and this sort of stuff's going on right around the country. But going out onto country and trying to figure things out and retrace paths of ancestors and look at the world in the way that our old people would have looked at it and the way that some of us still look at it today. A lot of that has to do with linking up story, song, pictures to geographical features. So obviously this looks like a dog. This is a dog rock in Albany, yeah. I used to live in a little 2-bedroom house up the road behind the Dog Rock Hotel. So obviously you got things that, you know, everyone knows that's Dog Rock. Not many people know the story about Dog Rock. We got a dog story as part of one of the books that we put out and the stories we workshopped. We've got dogs jumping through flames into the ocean and becoming seals. Okay, and following another sort of path, a path through some terrain, doing some stuff as dogs, and then a path as seals, connecting two brothers from different areas. And I heard this song that was recorded in South Australia by a man who clearly described it as a... I understood the words as I heard this song. This is an archival recording from the 60s. And the song quite clearly sings, there's a dog jumping over the fire. Okay, jumping through the fire. And I talked to Uncle Russell Nelly, whose father told this story about the fire turning into seals to that American linguist back in the 30s. I told Uncle Ross about the song. He's like, that sounds like it fits. We sung the song together. That sounds like it fits. And then we went into the to this national park where people aren't really allowed to go. Only the rangers are allowed to go there. Uncle Graham in the middle there with the sunnies on, he knows the ranger. So we went in there for a few days with people from the local natural resource management mob. They gave us some troopies, and two of the guys from there, really great guys, they came in with us. And we went through that park for about 3 days, you know, sleeping in the bush. It was just beautiful. And because not a lot of people are allowed in there, you get all like the black-gloved wallabies, you get the native bees, you get all these beautiful animals and insects and creatures that we don't get to see in farming land or in town, you know. And we went looking for the landmarks that connect to that dog story. Yeah, so we got pictures that we've done, we got the story that we've reconnected with, we got this strange song that seems to fit. And we managed to find some pretty amazing landmarks that kind of link everything together and sort of act as a proof of ongoing tradition. And you sort of ask, well, what's the proof? Is it the story? Is it the song? Is it the things still there? Well, it's all that, but it's also us doing it. That's the tradition. Yeah. And that's Uncle Russell at the front there. So that's his dad's story that enabled all this to sort of come together. So yeah, I don't know, is that enough of a yarn from me? And then we'll sort of try and put that together.
Thanks so much for that. I think there was some enormous connections there, which cool. I don't think... see ya. There was some fantastic connections there, which I think, yeah, are unmistakable. One thing I was really interested in, I guess, connecting with is Lynn Honest always described himself as a bowerbird artist. And it's an idea that I've always really connected with, this idea that, especially in the Southeast, for us, I know that we've often had to pull strings together, find little notebooks like you have, connect with country, find something here, pull it together and weave that into a story, like a bit like a bowerbird, yeah. Going around collecting things and making these beautiful nests. And I think that's a really important methodology, which I think connects Aboriginal people together in a really meaningful way. How do you formalise that? How do you talk about that at a university level?
Well, kind of like I just did there. It's funny, when I'm teaching at the uni, I mean, I teach contemporary music. So I'm talking about all sorts of different music. And it's only just recently that at the Conservatorium they've started to do an Aboriginal music unit, mm-hmm. but that's directed at school teachers trying to include more Aboriginal music in their music teaching in high schools. And so I don't actually get to talk about this much. In terms of at an academic level, yeah. With research, so journal articles, book chapters, that sort of thing, I've had to immerse myself in the European traditions of academia. I have to speak as an ethnomusicologist sometimes, so I have to figure out what the French were writing about the Brazilians in 19 something, and somehow relate that to how that works with what we're up to. I've got to write sometimes pretending that I'm a linguist, which I'm not. I have no linguistic training whatsoever. I kind of know what an adjective is. So you have to go into each discipline, academic, and try and figure out what people are talking about. So when you're writing, you don't just seem like some Johnny-come-lately that doesn't know what they're talking about, because then you won't be taken seriously. So it's this double-edged sword where if you're doing something that's multidisciplinary and you try and present yourself as an academic, or, you know, writing a chapter in a book about a specific discipline, you need to go deep into that discipline so what you're saying doesn't just get discounted, and so that you can intellectually contribute on that, in that sort of sphere. Which I guess is a bit of a pressure, but, you know, we've always been up to the challenge, eh?
Yeah. Well, and then the other thing that spins off that, I was keen to just ask you, something I found which is a little bit complicated sometimes, is being a young person going off, finding information, learning bits of information that sometimes wasn't available to everyone. Taking that knowledge back to your elders is sometimes difficult, you know, because you don't want to appear to be to know more information than your elders. It really messes up the system. Yeah. When you're coming with more information than other people. How do you sort of overcome that issue?
The thing that I keep in my mind, and that I've received a lot of advice over this on this over the years, is that system that you just mentioned, that's the tradition, that's the culture. And for you to ask me that question as something that you've experienced and that I've experienced means that we have an idea, and that whole thing of, you know, seniority within community, within family, and that's the thing worth preserving more than anything. You know, so that's the thing to keep in mind. Like with all this stuff, like I, you know, found 99 blooming songs. Wow. And I've looked at them and gone, oh yeah, I think this is this, I think this is this. What I think of these songs doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter. And I've sort of brought stuff into, you know, smaller groups, larger groups at different rates, just as from this very junior position where I've gone, oh, you asked me to find some stuff. Oh, what do you think of this? And, you know, talk about it in a small group first, maybe bring some of that to a larger group. And it's a very slow, deliberate process. But at the heart of it, it's not because I don't want to seem like I'm grandstanding. It's because I know that what I think of this stuff, I mean, I've only got, you know, 34 years of context into my interpretation. Senior people's interpretation of this stuff is going to have a lot more context and a lot more authority. So just because, you know, I might have brought some stuff in that I don't own it. You know, I'm just the messenger. You know.
Yeah. Does anyone have any questions that we might be able to ask Clint? Nothing. I have. I could ask you a million questions. One of the things that you talked about was that there was this interesting, this idea of, yes, learning language through songs is really important and is a great way to activate. But you were also talking about that if you go to old songs, sometimes they're not that helpful in learning language, that people have shortened words, changed words, modified them to fit the song, which is interesting that the song is dictating the language more than the language is dictating the song.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Because we think, we can learn language through song. That's really good. Song's a mnemonic device. Yeah, great. And then we listen to some of these old songs and the words have changed because the melody may be more important, the rhythm may be more important, performing it may be more important. It's like when you have songs in English, you know, sometimes the words are a little bit different when you sing them. But the thing that I found interesting about the Noongar songs is when you read the early colonial documents, those British people in that talk about Noongars as much as they speak. And that's something, that idea of a communicative culture where you talk sometimes and you sing sometimes, means that I like to think that giving equal weight to what's going on in song and just being able to speak the language is pretty important. And in terms of, you know, those differences between spoken and sung language in the Noongar context, I just wrote a book chapter, I think it's coming out towards the end of the year. It's not that different. You sort of need to know what you're looking for. The start of words is usually very similar, and it's just the ends that are a bit different. But a lot of the grammar stays the same, and a lot of what's changing is for poetic effect. And if you understand what's going on poetically, which I kind of think I may be getting close to, maybe, then there's potential to apply that to spoken language, to make the spoken language sort of come alive a bit more too. All real, I mean, it's sort of cart before the horse sort of stuff. Sometimes it's difficult to know how to work with this stuff, but I think there's a danger in going, well, okay, I speak English as a first language. There's a danger in me interpreting through the prism of English language and not allowing it to be all it can be as something that's incredibly poetic and expressive. So I think it's important when we're approaching Aboriginal languages, especially when we speak English as a first language, not to be shuttered in by what English does and can do. Because I think a lot of the Aboriginal language of Australia are capable of a lot more than what we do
within a Western framework. Yeah, that idea of just squishing it in. Oh, here we go. Oh, wait a sec, there's a microphone coming, sorry.
Clint and Jonathan, just in the spirit of today, where we're remembering a great part of our history that got lost very quickly, when you were talking about your Willerman process and the cycle of learning, I'm just aware of the enemy of time. It's been, it is a real issue. How are you documenting the steps that you take? 400 people, it is vulnerable. How are you actually embedding this and consolidating that process?
The process itself?
Oh no, what you're learning.
Okay.
Obviously, you're doing it through song and you're through talking and dialogue and spreading it through the families. But from an archival sense, how do we make sure that there's not a spot fire on your culture?
Well, I've put in a grant application to work with Paradisec at the Con. That's the Pacific and Australian Digital Archive, some sort of version of that, to back up everything we've got. So we've got our own digital archive that we just run as a very small thing because we're a very small, relatively insignificant organisation. So I've put in a grant to sort of work with them more to back up everything we've got, and that's sort of where we're at the moment. I mean, the thing is, it's not actually that much archival material. Most of what we're doing sort of lives through the people that are involved. And then a lot of the material that we're using is already archived, say at the Batty Library in Western Australia, or in IATSIS. But the material that's generated out of this process, especially as we move more towards performance, hopefully we'll get Paradisec involved in that, which is hopefully going to start from next year.
And will that process because I guess one of I mean, our elders are the most things, like those knowledge holders. How are you guys working to sort of capture some of their spoken word?
The beautiful thing is that everyone's got iPhones and stuff now, or not that I want to advertise Apple. Everyone's got smartphones. Is that what you call them?
Yeah.
Phones where you can record audio and video. So a lot of it is fairly, and you'll just have, because you never know when someone's going to share something, and we're lucky enough to now be able to just record on the spot, and it's just a matter of how do we do that in a systematic, organised way, because at a relatively grassroots level, it's easy for things to
But you managed to find some notes in the roof of an American house.
Oh, it wasn't me. I think it was his.
No,
it was that linguist's children, I think, that found them and sent them to IATSIS.
So those scraps of information that people have recorded throughout, we've so I dare say you're probably doing a better job on those iPhones than
I think, well,
a few scraps of paper.
Yeah, and one thing to sort of make mention of is, like, even when people are saying, like, my process, things that I'm doing this, I'm just here representing the crew, right? I'm a very small part of this. I'm a music teacher, yeah? And because I'm a Noongar and because I believe this stuff's important, I try and make myself useful in this space. And because I'm in Sydney and I live here, Jonathan doesn't have to pay for me to fly in, so I'll come and talk about it. But all this, it's a group thing, yeah? And even the process, like I'm Johnny Come Lately in terms of getting involved, really, in the way that senior people in my family have been pushing this stuff for a long, long time. But although you say, like, the elders are the most precious resource, and no disrespect to senior people, but I think it's those very young ones. That's what we really need to focus on, is finding ways to hook them in, because it's sad, even within what we're doing, we're all getting older each year, and we're finding that, how do we hook those young ones in? And with everything that's going on today with globalization, the digital feed everywhere of this global culture, it's how do we hook those young ones into this sense of place and sense of identity and sense of who they are. They're the really important questions, I think. I don't know if it's academically or in terms of basic humanity or what it is, but that's sort of where my attention's going at the moment.
Maybe one last question before we...
Hello. I don't come from here. I come from up I'm Murray Nahari from Queensland, so best footy state, you know that. I'm a Kanjubiri woman. You just spoke about getting young children connected with the digital age and everything, like with everything that goes on. We do art within our community of Glebe, and we have everyone that comes. It's a cultural garden, and the music is most important, and your imagery, and with technology, it's numbing the children too. They can only have a certain time to listen, because like the listening, but it's also the practice of talking and gathering, and as you said, with the art is really important. So music and the lyricism and the music is really important for them to hear, and they need to have that. Like, what do you do? How can you push that in schools? Because sometimes it's only for particular times, but this music is for always, because the birds are every day, and they wake us and they say goodnight to us, and then they're through the night. And you being a music man, and the importance of your role to connect that again with the younger. How can you do that within your role in here at the Conservatorium of Music?
Yeah, so it's a bit tricky when I'm over in Sydney and I'm teaching, mainly Wodgila students how to, write and produce the perfect pop song, because that's my job. But with this project that I'm trying to put together for next year, it's going to try and link into the idea of the viral video. So you got your YouTube videos and whatnot that all the younger people, and even, my uncles that I went through the park with, they were all looking at videos on the best way to skin a rabbit. That went viral amongst us. And that idea that the viral video is something that you can see who's doing it. Yeah, so you've got this identification, relationship with the person almost, and it's audio, and you can see what they're doing. Very different to written media, which is most of the internet and most of this digital stuff that students are dealing with. And so I'm intrigued by the idea of how viral videos can help with this sort of thing, because young people have short attention spans. If we can get some sort of viral video culture around really important local and then sometimes ancient culture, if we can link those two things somehow, I think there's some possibilities there. And at the same time, that's why I put in for this grant that I keep mentioning. Hopefully they fund it, otherwise I'll just be hanging around here. Involve me going back and doing a lot more work back home.
Yeah, and that's what it's about, isn't it? Belonging, and time, place and belonging, and who you belong to always, now and will be. And the thing is, I love the statement that David Unapon makes on the $50 note, Nut and Jerry Man, and he invented the shears. He was the Da Vinci of Australia. He talks about customs, beliefs and imaginings, and that's all, with song. And, I love, you made me cry because I hear of my father and all the old people talking, and but the beauty continues with those imaginings, with the art. Children, you can't beat children's art. They have it, but we ruin it by everything else. But thank you.
No, you're making me cry too now.
So thank you so much for that.